Is the original 20-minute power test outdated? With all kinds of new technology out there, from the ramp test to the 2x8 minute method, there's all kinds of different ways to test your FTP. So does this mean that the 20-minute test is outdated? Like, has its time passed? Is the 20-minute test dead? Yo, it's Dizzle. You've landed on my YouTube channel, and I'm glad you're here. But you might be asking, yo, Dizzle, what's your channel even about? And I feel like my life, I've just got my hand in all kinds of different pots, like over here, over there, over here. So that's probably gonna be reflected in my YouTube channel. The things that I'm most passionate about are coaching, racing, and most importantly, my faith. So if you were wondering what my YouTube channel is going to be about, it's going to be about those three things: about coaching, racing, and my faith. Today, however, I'm going full-blown nerd on you. So this would fall under the coaching category. Today, I'm going to be talking about power tests. Talk to you about why I switched from an 8-minute testing method protocol to a 20-minute testing. So in 20 minutes, kind of like the original old school way of testing FTP anyways. So I'm trying to answer the question, is that outdated? Is it retro for me to start testing my athletes with a 20-minute test versus an 8-minute test? Over the past 2 to 3 years since I've been coaching, I have primarily utilized the 2x8 minute method. So basically what an athlete is told to do is to go out, get a good warm up, do 2 all-out 8-minute efforts, and then I take the average watts from those 8-minute tests, whichever one's the highest, and I take 90% of that and then get their FTP. So for example, when I was fast in 2019, a long time ago, my power numbers were right around 420 for an 8-minute test. And then, so I take that 420 times 0.9, and that puts me right around a 375 threshold. And there's 2 main reasons why people maybe prefer this 8-minute method versus other methods. And primarily, I think because it's just shorter. So the number one reason is just length. 8 minutes is less than half of 20, which means it's a way shorter effort, and that just seems so much more appealing to coaches, to athletes, and all that. Number 2 is probably just because of the stress. An 8-minute test is just not that stressful. And so what that means for the coach is that they can plan more of those 8-minute tests into a training plan because it's not so stressful. So to do an 8-minute test once a month isn't that big of a deal. However, the main reason why the 8-minute test is probably not so good is because it's just simply too short. 8 minutes does not give us a good enough indication of a person's FTP. Maybe they can go really hard for 8 minutes, so that would project their FTP as being pretty high, when in reality it's not that high. And so the main negative to an 8-minute test is that it's just too short. Now, on the other hand, you have a 20-minute test, the traditional 20-minute power test. And what you do with this method is still the same main idea. You're going all out for 20 minutes. And then after you do that, we'll take your average watts for that 20 minutes and take 95% of that to get your FTP. And at first thought, you might think, who in the world would want to do a 20-minute test to get their FTP when you can just do an 8-minute test and get the same exact thing, potentially? And the answer to that question is pretty simple: no one. And that is why I want to go back to the 20-minute test. Nobody wants to do a 20-minute test because they're afraid. They're wussies. Because a 20-minute test is just plain hard. And I think as athletes, we need more opportunities to push ourselves both physically and mentally. So one of the big advantages of why I'm going back to the traditional 20-minute test is simply because of that. A 20-minute test is going to push and increase your mental toughness. And besides that, if we're just going to talk about the science of it, a 20-minute power test is just more accurate. You've got more time to test your FTP. 20 minutes is going to really weed out what your actual FTP is, or at least close to it, a lot closer than a short 8-minute test. So the main reason that I've switched to a traditional 20-minute test is because it's just a more accurate way of tracking FTP. And along with that, it's also just another opportunity for athletes to push themselves mentally. However, I did not just stop there. I went all out. I added an entire second day to my power testing protocol.
What? Say what again? Say what again? I dare you.
Here's what it looks like. On day one, I've got my athletes doing a good warm up, and then they do 2 all out 5 to 10 second sprints. And then after that, they do a good cool down, 5 to 10 minutes. Then they do an all out 1 minute effort, a 1 minute power test, cool down, 5 to 10 minutes. And then to top it all off, they're gonna do a 5-minute all out effort. So the main thing I'm trying to accomplish by doing all these different power tests is the simple realization that not all athletes are the same. So on one end of the spectrum, you've got maybe your time trialist who's really, really strong at the 20-minute number, but they're not so strong at the 5-second, 1-minute number. So you can adjust their training to improve some of their weaknesses or just keep their strengths strong. On the other hand, you've got maybe somebody that's like a pursuiter or a sprinter, 15-second, 1-minute kind of effort, but they struggle with the 20-minute effort. And if that's going to hold them back in racing, well, then we have to improve that 20-minute number one way or another. So it gives me a broader spectrum, a broader understanding of each athlete's strengths and weaknesses. And then I can use that information to better develop their training plan to improve things they need to improve or keep things strong that are already strong. One of the things that I'll be utilizing in this new testing protocol is something called the Power Profile chart. Basically, this chart tells you where you fall within cycling, like what category you fall for each of those 4 tests. You've got your 5-second number, your 1-minute number, your 5-minute number, and your 20-minute number. It takes your watts per kilogram for each of those and then throws you on a chart and says, okay, you're a Cat 5 at sprinting, but you're a world-class time trialist. So it gives you this, it just throws you on this chart and it gives you kind of like a good idea of where you fall in all the different categories within cycling. So to give you a little bit more understanding of this, I'm gonna show you my Power Profile chart right now. All right, we are in the WKO software. This is my Power Profile chart, these 4 blue boxes. You can tell right off the bat that those shorter power tests, the 5-second and the 1-minute, those are my weaknesses. Those are obviously lower than my other 2 tests, which are my 5-minute and my 20-minute FTP, where you can see I get all the way up into the exceptional category for those tests. All right, I've done a fair amount of testing in my career. So I want to give you guys some pointers to help you minimize some of the heartache. No pun intended. So first of all, I want to talk about pacing. If you're going to be doing a 15-second or a 1-minute test, there's not much pacing there. Like you're going all out for 15 seconds. You're going all out for 1 minute because you can actually do that. You can go all out for 15 seconds and 1 minute. But when you start to get to the 5-minute test and the 20-minute test, pacing starts to really play a bigger role within the test. 5-minute test, you can definitely overdo it. It's a little bit harder, but you definitely don't want to overdo it. So definitely pace yourself, maybe break it up into 2 chunks, 2.5 minutes and then 2.5 minutes. But where pacing really comes into play is that 20-minute test because it is a long time for a test. So what most people do is break it up into 4 5-minute chunks. You've got the first 5 minutes, then to the 10-minute mark, 15-minute mark, 20-minute mark. What I'll tell people is, okay, let's say your goal is 300 watts. For your average watts for the full 20 minutes, you want it to be 300. For the first 10 minutes, do 290, just to play it safe. Because if you go out and try to average 300 for the first 10 minutes and then you just hit the wall, you're not even gonna be able to finish the 20-minute test, and that means you're probably gonna have to do it again sometime in the next few weeks, and we don't want that. So rather than failing your test, you should start the first 10 minutes a little bit below where your goal is, maybe 285, 290. You hit that 10-minute mark and you feel good, dude, add on the watts, bring it on. So for that next 10 to 15 minute mark, put it at 300, put it at 310 if you're feeling good. And then for that last 5 minutes, you're basically leaving it all out there. If you can get to 320, 330, then you'll just see that number, that average watts, which you should have on your computer. You should see that number go tick, 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 all the way up to like a 300. And that's what I would say is the most important thing about pacing for these tests. And I can't tell you how many times I've hit the 12-minute mark. I'm serious, 12 minutes. That's like the detonator for me. Every time I hit that 12-minute mark, it's like, I can't finish. Like, I've gone too hard. I do it every time, and I'm like, why did I go so hard for the first 10 minutes? And now I'm struggling to hold anything worth holding by the 12-minute mark. So learn from my mistakes and pace yourself that first 10 minutes. Another little tidbit that I would add is don't get stuck in the saddle. Stand up every couple minutes. You're gonna use some different muscle groups. You might be able to put out a little bit more power standing up, so then that's a good opportunity to get the average up 1 or 2 watts. So stand up every couple minutes because that's gonna help your muscles from locking up or getting tired or getting fatigued. And one last pro tip that's worth mentioning is prepare for these pretty seriously. You don't have to treat them like a full-on race day. Like, you don't need to bust out the trainer and do a trainer warm-up, but you need to take it pretty seriously. Like, don't eat a slice of pizza for lunch that day. Like, eat a good, nutritious lunch, time it out properly so that you're not gonna cramp in the middle of your test. Like, prepare for these things. Because they're serious, and if you niche it, then you're gonna have to do it again. And so let's make sure that you're really, really on top of your schedule, on top of your nutrition, even on top of your sleep the night before, so that you can have the best possible test that you can have. Ultimately, it is my goal to be a great coach.
Be excellent to each other. And party on, dudes!
And one of the big things that comes with that is always improving. And I believe that this is one of those big improvements that is also it's gonna help me to be a better coach, but more importantly, it's gonna help the athletes I coach achieve the goals that they have set for themselves. And at the bare minimum, it will prove whether or not I'm actually helping them improve. All right, I know there's not much content on my YouTube page yet, but I promise you there's all kinds of stuff that I'm working on and I'm planning on putting on the channel. So let's make sure you hit that subscribe button and I'll keep the content coming. And thank you for watching. As a way to show you how grateful I am for you watching, I'm gonna leave you with a little something to take with you. What kind of a tree wears mittens? A palm tree.